The Mercedes EQB may not be the most exciting new EV on the market. It's got all the makings of a compromised vehicle. I mean, it's just an electric GLB. And because it's based on the GLB, but it has a big battery, it has several major disadvantages compared to an electric vehicle built on a bespoke EV platform. However, it's still a great vehicle with plenty to like, and I actually like it a lot more than I did the EQA that I drove a couple of years back. My tester is also the most powerful version available, the EQB 350 4Matic, which gets 2 electric motors, 1 for each axle, and it's really strong. It's also a 7-seater, optional 7-seater. My tester has the third row, and we're gonna check it out. But first, let me walk you around the exterior of the vehicle. So my tester has the AMG pack, which gets this aggressive front bumper with the typical AMG design. It also gets some unique AMG rims, which I have to admit I'm not a huge fan of. They aren't very deep, they are quite flat. And they also have this design here, which I imagine is designed to smoothen the airflow around the wheel, I guess, for aerodynamic purposes, since this is an EV and they want to eke out as much aero as possible. The mirrors are also black because this is the AMG pack. The wheels on my tester are 19-inch and the tires are 235/50 19s, winter tires still. Around the back, you can really notice just how upright and tall the EQB is. As I said, this is the EQB 350, the most powerful one they make currently. It's all-wheel drive. And because this is the AMG car, the AMG pack car rather, you get the more aggressive rear bumper with the fake diffuser, which is pretty cool. I think overall the vehicle looks good. It definitely looks better than the EQA, which I am not at all a fan of. I mean, this looks like a mini G-Class, I guess. I also like the front end design a bit better on this. In fact, the headlights, come to think of it, I think they might be identical, but it's just the context of this boxier body that makes them look better. The car has blue details to let you know that this is the electric model. The car also has a full width light bar, both in the front and in the rear. And because this is the electric version, the grille is completely covered. I'm not a huge fan of the way this little camera thing sticks out here. And if you get a vehicle that doesn't have the surround view camera system, you still get the bump here, but the camera itself is actually just a plastic cover. One of the disadvantages of engineering an electric car on an internal combustion engine vehicle platform is the fact that under the hood, you usually don't get a frunk. And in the EQB's case, this isn't an exception. Under the hood, all you get is this. This is mainly like cooling lines, I would say, for the battery and for the motors. The front motor, since this is all-wheel drive, is under there somewhere. Yeah, there's the 12-volt battery, coolant. So you need pink coolant for this, apparently. Some of these acoustic things here, but since there's no gas engine here, they didn't add like a foam cover or anything, so you can like see the design here. Yeah, not much to see here, or a lot to see, and you would prefer not to see it. But maybe for Mercedes' next generation of electric vehicles built on bespoke EV platforms. You can tell that this is the EQB if you were in any doubt by the badge here on the front fender or wing, if you are British. I'm not a huge fan of the way this sits here. I mean, you could stick your fingernail under there and just peel it off. I had the same problem with the EQA. It just feels tacked on because it is tacked on. Let me show you the trunk area. So an electric opening. I've set things up here so I will be able to get in the rearmost row in a second here. So I've moved everything to the side. So without the third row of seats, this car has a 495-liter trunk. With the optional third row, I think that drops to 465. Both are smaller than the gas-burning EQA, which gets over 500 liters, 530 or something. So the electric vehicle with its battery that does push the floor up does also eat into the trunk. This is where you charge the EQB. I like that Mercedes adopted BMW's system, or I only saw it on BMW aside from this, so that when you, for instance, you want to open both flaps so you get access to the CCS connection, you just press on this and both of them pop open. Whereas if you need the slow charger, you can just pop this out, and that's pretty cool. It's definitely more elegant than having like the covers dangling here. I also like the chunky roof rails. I think they make a huge difference to the look of the vehicle. I mean, it will look half as good without them, if I'm honest. And they also hide this car's optional panoramic sunroof, which actually opens. But I'll show you that from the inside. And now the moment of truth. I'm going to attempt to get into the third row. So the seats, as you can see, they are on rails and you can slide them forward. There's like a handle here that you can grab, because otherwise I won't be able to fit in the rear. So as you can see, I've slid this forward in a position where I really wouldn't fit. I mean, I have to really spread my legs. But this allows me to get into the back and actually have some kind of room. So you pull on this and then you slide the seat forward and you have like this dinky little mat here, which is very, very cute. It's the smallest one I've ever seen. And then you attempt to get into the back, which might be tricky. Okay, so I'm in, and now I'm going to attempt to put the seat back. So this is in the position that I showed you earlier where I had to spread my legs. But this means that in the back, in the third row, I actually have some kind of room. I actually have a little bit of knee room. I guess you could find a compromise and like slide the middle row in a intermediary position, you know, not too far back and not too far forward, so that both rows have some kind of room. And honestly, it's better than I expected. You even get cup holders. I'll plunk some B-roll in to show you, because now they're covered by the left seat, which is folded and I've put all the crap over it. But yeah, it's surprisingly usable. I'm actually surprised that I'm not hitting my head against the headlining. The second row gets like this recess here, so they have a lot more headroom. And since I'm back here, I'm going to show you that my tester has the optional double panoramic roof. The front one is actually open. The rear one doesn't open, but it's still pretty cool that it's here. It gives the interior a very unique road trip-esque type of vibe, which I really, really love. So yeah, this is the third row. Usable. There's not much space like behind the seat once you've erected the rear seats, but it's fine. I like that you even get like a little storage space here with a USB-C. You have one here and one on the other side. And now I'm going to attempt to get out of the third row. Okay, good start. One thing I can't say I'm a huge fan of is the fact that whenever you you move the backrest and then you put it back, it stays in its upright position, and you actually have to apply a bit of extra force to recline it in its natural comfy position. You can also quickly recline the backrest by pulling on this tab here. It won't go all the way down because it needs to be further back, which I'm going to do now. There it goes. And now I'm going to attempt to sit in the middle row. Okay, let me close the door. Yeah, definitely a lot of room here. So this is with the seat slid all the way back on the rails. I'm 183 centimeters tall and I have decent leg room, decent room for my feet to slide them underneath the front seat, which I find hugely important. There's like this recess here in the backrest that makes room for your knees, which is pretty good. One drawback of having an electric car built on an internal combustion engine vehicle platform is that when you put the battery in the floor of the vehicle, there is a chance that you may need to raise the floor, and this will impede on passenger space. And in the case of the EQB, just like in the EQA, this is present. If you sit in a GLB and then get aboard this car, you will notice that your knees are like a couple of centimeters higher and your thighs aren't actually hitting the cushion. At least not in my case. And my knees, I feel that they are a bit high. However, I feel that this is a much more accomplished second row than in the EQA, especially since you've got a lot of headroom, which is nice for a car with a panoramic roof that usually does eat into the headroom. Aside from this, there's not much else to talk about here. You get an armrest, which gets two cup holders that fold away, which is pretty good. In between the seats here, you don't get much. You just get the one USB-C and these climate vents. And the forward visibility is actually pretty good, even though the headrest is quite big. But the second row is definitely higher than the first row of seats, and this does give you a good view out. I'm not sure how good the view would be from the rearmost row of seats, but there you go. You can't have it all. I really like these grab handles, by the way. They have a metallic look to them, even though it's plastic, but they're actually quite nice and high quality. Okay, I'm gonna move to the driver's seat now. So up front, you get the same array of two 10-inch displays. One is the digital driver's display, and the other is the infotainment. This version of MBUX has been around for a few years, and there's not much to talk about it. There's nothing especially different in this application compared to others. Since this is the EQ model, you get a dedicated EQ menu, which shows you all kinds of EV-related things. The steering wheel is now the old style of steering wheel from Mercedes-Benz that only gets these touch controls. So the left one you adjust the gauge cluster with, while the right one is for infotainment. And I'm not sure why people say they have a problem with the touch thing here. I don't mind it. I think it's good. And you get physical controls for the adaptive cruise control, as well as paddles behind the steering wheel to adjust regenerative braking. Buttons here on the door. You can heat your seat using this. These are quite self-explanatory. You get 3 memory positions. This being an AMG pack car, you get lots of red stitching. So on the steering wheel, on top of the doors, on the seats here. Had this not been an AMG pack car, this all would have been blue, as well as around the mats. But in this one, they are just standard AMG ones. I really love the climate controls in this car. I think they are fantastic. This thing does move ever so slightly, but it doesn't feel low quality. The Mercedes factory in Hungary, where this is made, I think is really good, and they have a decent quality standard. Although the EQ model is actually better than the GLB, which I'll explain once we're on the move. You also get Alcantara on the doors, and there's actually a very thin layer of memory foam or something underneath here that makes it extra nice to touch. The car also has a head-up display in this application. Let's see if I can make it come up. And it even shows you the parking sensor display, which I think is quite cool. This is the typical control method, the touchpad for this version of MBUX. You select the driving mode through here. This is for the automatic parking function. This takes you to the car menu, which basically gives you access to your assistance system, your vehicle menu, lights, and system. Yeah, you just play around with various settings. Boy, this screen is super hot. It's burning my finger. Whew, it's really emanating a lot of heat for some reason. Anyway. Mercedes also gives you this handy palm rest, which makes operating this so much better. Then if you slide this forward, you reveal 2 cup holders, as well as a wireless charging pad for your phone, or my phone in this case. And you also get a USB-C and a 12 volt here. Since my car has the AMG pack, you get an adjustable thigh support, And even though the seats themselves are electric, you have to adjust this manually, but it's fine. It really is fine. The central armrest cubby is quite big. I mean, I can put my arm in there almost all the way up to my elbow, so that's pretty good. Overall materials quality, it isn't quite up there with the best Mercedes, or even up to the C-Classes level, if I'm honest. However, this is quite soft. Everything is reasonably well built, although this does seem to move a little bit. The top of the dash is soft. This has quite a lot of give. I mean, I appreciate a comfy center armrest. This has glossy plastic, which is already super scratched, but you expect that. The climate controls are the turbine style ones. My tester has mood lighting embedded in them, so the interior is lit. And so is this panel here. It actually has some nice backlighting. When it comes to the seats, I will say that I don't think they are the most comfortable ones in the world. These are a bit hard and they don't really have that much lateral support. But then again, this vehicle isn't especially sporty. It's more about the comfort and the space and the practicality. I'll take it out on the road now and tell you what it's like to drive, what it's like as an EV, and whether or not you should buy one. Shifting in the EQB is just as easy as in any Mercedes model. You just have this dinky little stalk here to the right of the steering wheel. My tester has the optional 360-degree surround view camera system, which is actually pretty good. Let me show you. And it even shows you the trajectory. And it's dynamic, it's quite good. And you can also adjust the view here. You have several views that you can cycle through. I think, to be honest, this one is the most useful. By the way, you can really see just how much the wheels turn in this car, giving it an excellent turning circle. Setting off in this car, you immediately notice just how smooth and quiet it is. Apparently, one of the things Mercedes did in converting this from the GLB into the EQB was to adjust some of the materials and the build quality of the interior to make it even quieter and more luxurious feeling. The interior feels reasonably solid. I wouldn't say it's as good as a C-Class, for instance, that just has the edge on design, materials, and technology and pretty much everything. But this is based on a cheaper front-wheel drive platform Mercedes, so there you go. The EQB is currently available in 2 all-wheel drive trims. The first one is the EQB 300 4Matic, whose pair of electric motors produce 228 horsepower. It's brisk enough, and I presume that that model will be the most popular one because it's ever so slightly more affordable, whereas this, the almost 300 horsepower EQB 350, starts at over 60,000 euros here. It starts at 62 or 61,000 euros. So it's quite an expensive vehicle. And while for most people the EQB 300's 228 horsepower might seem enough, I prefer this car because it's really brisk. Whew. Doing 100 there, just gonna slow down. Mercedes will also release an EQB 250 that gets a single front-mounted electric motor that produces, I think it's 190 horsepower. I had that powertrain in the EQA, and it didn't make the vehicle feel particularly fast, and it left me wanting for more power, I guess. Around corners, as you saw back there, you do feel this vehicle's mass combined with its relatively soft suspension. But again, this is totally a cruiser. You wouldn't want to corner carve in this vehicle, and you probably couldn't. It really rolls into the corners. I mean, the steering is reasonably sharp, and I'm not questioning how well this car grips, but the suspension feels really boaty. And I'm sure that this is by design because Mercedes knows who's going to be buying this car, and that they're not racers in any way, which is why I think the less powerful version will be the more popular one. The 350 that I'm driving today hits 100 kilometers per hour from standstill in 6.2 seconds, which is quite quick. And it feels slightly quicker thanks to its 520 Newton meters of torque, which is a lot, especially since it's delivered just like that because this is an electric car. Another interesting point about this electric vehicle, it doesn't really charge that quickly. So it has an onboard 11 kilowatt AC charger, which should replenish the battery in around 7 hours. But if you want to DC fast charge it, it is limited to 100 kilowatts, which is really low by today's standards. Even other vehicles that are converted ICE models perform better. Mercedes says that 100 kilowatts is still good for 20 to 80% state of charge in around half an hour. And I guess that's fine, and for most people, this really isn't an issue. However, you can buy vehicles, in fact, pretty much all of this car's rivals offer faster charging. It also has regenerative braking, as you would imagine for an EV, and you can play with it via the paddles on the steering wheel. If you want maximum regen, you pull on the left paddle until D- appears on the screen. It's worth noting that since this car has a creep function that you cannot disable like you can in some other EVs, even with the brake regen in its most aggressive setting, once the vehicle reaches, it decelerates on its own without you pressing the brakes. So once it reaches around 10 kilometers per hour, it will maintain that speed, in spite of the fact that up to that point, it decelerated quite dramatically. So I'm going to try to show you now. I'm lifting off, and the entire bar, the regen bar here, fills up to 100%. So this is in the D- setting. If I pull once on the right paddle, I'm in D mode, and if I lift off, you get about 60, yeah, I would say 60%. Pull on the right paddle again, and you get to D+ mode, which may feel like you're actually coasting, but you really aren't. If you look at the charge meter, it still fills up to around a quarter, even in D+ mode. The final regen mode, which you can access by keeping either of the paddles pressed, is D Auto, which adjusts the level of regeneration depending on what's in front of the vehicle. So for instance, now when there's nothing ahead of me, I just lift off, and the regen bar doesn't even fill up to a quarter like it does in D+ mode. So you're really coasting in D Auto. I'm lifting off again. Okay, so it is starting to fill up the bar, but now it isn't, and speed is just gradually tapering off, but very moderately. You don't feel any significant deceleration. So as we approach this BMW in front and lift off, the car does much more aggressively regen. There was this instance when a car did start braking in front of me, and the EQB didn't start decelerating as I would have expected, and it gave me a bit of a scare. I mean, I was relying on the car, which had worked flawlessly in D Auto up until that point, and it just didn't brake. The regen meter was on 0. But overall, my experience driving this car in D Auto mode is a positive one. Although, I've mostly found myself just driving it in D+, especially since if you apply the brake, you get regen. So you just lightly tap on the brake pedal and the regen will go way past 50% before the car starts using the friction brakes. I think the system is quite well judged, and I like that the pedal has consistent feel. So unlike in some other EQ models from Mercedes, the brake feel and the brake pressure that you have to apply doesn't change depending on how much the car is regenning at that particular moment. The brake pedal generally feels very consistent, and it does inspire confidence, which is very good news. The last thing you want in an EV is a brake pedal that is so inconsistent that it makes you not trust the vehicle. I would have liked maybe an option to turn off creep mode, but it is interesting the way creep mode works, because for instance, I was trying to pull out of a parking garage whose exit ramp is at an angle, and I was surprised to find out that as I was lifting off the brake, so the vehicle was, it was a fairly steep incline, let me tell you, and as I was lifting off the brake, the car was showing me that it was using like 25, 30, 40% of its power just to creep up that ramp without me even touching the accelerator, which I found kind of interesting. If you didn't have the power charge meter on, you really wouldn't know that that's happening. It's very smooth and seamless. Another thing that I found interesting about this car is that the electric motors that it uses for the front and rear axle are of different types. I'm not sure exactly how much power they make because I didn't find the individual values for each motor listed. But the rear motor is definitely the main one in terms of power and torque delivery. And it is a permanent magnet motor, which means that it's always engaged and it's always either accelerating or regenning, I guess. And since there's no way to physically disconnect it, it's always there. And it really gives you a very nice kick in the back when you accelerate this car hard. I like the way it's tuned, definitely. It's tuned a bit aggressively, but I don't mind that. I think it's good. The front motor, on the other hand, is of the asynchronous type, which means that when you're not feeding it power, the front axle is essentially coasting, which is excellent for efficiency since at higher speed you can just run on the rear motor, and even just driving around normally, even when you accelerate it a little bit, the car still feels rear-wheel drive, but when you floor it, you even get a little bit of torque steer and you feel the front wheels scrabbling for grip. This empty looking stretch of road seems like the best place to do a launch. So 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 6.2 seconds. My battery level is just over 50%. In my experience, this doesn't seem to taper off the power significantly as the state of charge drops, like it does in some other cars, which after 80% no longer deliver full power. So let's see. Loading it up, releasing the brake. The front scrabbles for grip, as I said, and it really pulls. And that's 100. Did you hear anything? No, exactly. One of this car's party pieces, I think, is just how comfortable, smooth, and quiet, and relaxing, and nice to drive it is. One of the disadvantages of turning an internal combustion engine vehicle into an EV is that you will add extra weight and will be quite a bit heavier than it would have been had it been an EV built on a bespoke EV platform. I mean, a comparable GLB to this with four-wheel drive and 300-ish horsepower weighs around 1.8 tons, but the EQB with its battery pack, motors and everything else, it's over 2.1 tons. And you really feel this. I mean, it's good for comfort because it makes the ride feel quite settled, but show it a corner when you're driving it at higher speed and it will start to feel unsettled. To be honest, this car doesn't have the most confidence-inspiring handling. So is the EQB a recommendable vehicle? Well, I think it looks pretty good on the outside. It's very unique. Nothing else looks like it on the road. I prefer the way the GLB looks to the EQB. I would choose some different wheels for this car. I would go for the copper ones with the smaller spokes. I think those are the best looking on this car. But other than that, I think I would still pick the AMG pack, which just gives it a slightly sportier edge visually because the driving experience is the same. And if you're going to buy this vehicle over some other comparable EV, you should get it with the third row. I mean, it's one of the big reasons why this would appeal to someone over another similar electric crossover. Because frankly, if you don't need the 7 seats, I think there are better vehicles out there. I mean, this is quite expensive and it doesn't feel like the most plush and posh Mercedes, especially when it comes to the materials inside, which are fine, but they are not amazing. So I think that you should really consider this vehicle if you want 7 seats in an electric crossover. That's also premium. Because otherwise your options for a 7-seat crossover that runs on batteries are quite limited. There's the 2 Teslas, the Model Y and the Model X. Kia also recently revealed the EV9, which is a huge looking thing that I can't wait to drive. To be honest, it looks amazing, and they tested it on the Nürburgring, which should result in some interesting handling, even though it's a big, tall and heavy SUV. This pretty much sums up my thoughts on the EQB. I really liked it. I hope you liked the video. Thank you for watching it until the end, and I'll see you in the next one.